Hello watch enthusiasts! Now today I have the review of a watch which is somewhat a peculiar case because it's a remarkably affordable and extremely well built, it must be said, 600 metre dive watch from CHRONICLER. And I've spoken about a titanium piece from this brand before, but this piece moves over to steel and has a beautifully finished case and a really very interesting design, and is a curious model in terms of demonstrating the value of different sizes in watches, and also the general decision over the materials used, because I think this is an attractive piece at a very reasonable price. Now before I begin the video, I would of course like to encourage you to like, share and subscribe if you do enjoy this video or find its content useful. And also do follow me on Instagram at the address which is now on the screen to see more content which otherwise wouldn't be available simply on the YouTube channel. And before I begin the video, I'd also like to say that I haven't been paid to say anything positive about this watch. I've simply been sent the watch with the option and the ability to be able to review this piece, and so I'd like to do so with the greatest transparency in terms of just being clear that I haven't been paid to say anything in particular about this timepiece. Now the general packaging of this timepiece is rather attractive, and it comes in this blue leatherette sort of case with a zip and this orange accenting, which I think is nicely done and provides a very appealing option for someone who wants to travel with their watch on a regular basis. Now if you pop this open, you see the inside has this sort of velour or suede feel to it, as well as this central piece with the watch of course placed at the centre, and it's a very large size. Also there is space for a strap up here, and I'll show you the strap which comes with this watch in addition to this mesh bracelet. And of course the watches do each come with the rather attractive CHRONICLER warranty cards, which give you a 5-year warranty and come in this sort of metal form, which I think is very appealing and does give you a nice additional aspect to the purchase of a timepiece. And so here's the piece out of the box, and this is a watch which comes in at $999, and I believe at the moment most of the models are sold out, but I don't know if they'll be restocked. But in terms of these pieces, they're a general limited run of 500 pieces throughout all the different colourways of these models, with some blue versions and also orange dials, whilst this version is the most monochromatic, with the black and white form and just this orange accent on the second hand, and also that large plongeur style minute hand. And it's a watch which certainly draws a great deal from the 1970s, because the case of this watch is stainless steel, and is, I must say, beautifully made. It really is a fantastically well-made case, and one notices that quite immediately from just the finishing of the brushing, which is very, very well grained, and also the polishing down the bevels, which is very well executed and speaks for itself in terms of that quality. Similarly, the bezel is nicely milled in that form, with these strakes and also scalloped areas, which mean the bezel is very easy to grip, but I'll speak about that more when I'm speaking about the front of the watch. Then looking at the side, this watch is curved gently in this sort of cushion shape, if you will, with a circular brushed area on the top of the case, and this lengthways brushing along the side, with a helium escape valve, which I would assume those two slots are to screw it into place, whilst you also have a signed screw-down crown on the opposite side, which sits unprotected on the side of the case, but is again attractively brushed and really is very well finished. Interestingly, if one looks at the case back, one has a very typical sort of style for these ocean crawlers, because one has this ocean crawler logo with this matted area in the centre, and of course you see that it's stainless steel and is a 600 metre dive watch. Now of course 600 metres places it very much into the realms of professional divers, and you really would feel it having this watch in the hand. The watch itself is 44mm in diameter, but feels a heck of a lot larger because of its weight. Then it's 50mm from lug to lug, which again is shorter than it feels, in the sense that the size of this watch simply makes it feel larger. And then of course one has this 15.6mm thickness, so it really is a sizable dive watch. And it's a piece which actually, unlike most large watches, which tend to be very well engineered to feel smaller than they are, this watch feels larger than it is. So that's a point of discussion, something I'll show you when I have this watch on the wrist, because I think that really demonstrates something about this piece. But then if you look at the front of the watch, you see a 4mm thick sapphire crystal, and it's flat on this watch with an AR coating, which I must say is very well done as well. The viewing angles are very, very wide, with really only the most extreme of angles allowing the watch to become mirror-like on its front. And it's a 4mm thick crystal, which seems extremely thick, bearing in mind that dive watches with a higher water resistance have thinner ones quite often, say 3 or 3.5mm. But I think this is a testament to just how overbuilt this watch is. The screw-down crown is large, the crystal is very thick, the whole case is very well reinforced, and really is a piece which says a great deal about its resistance to the elements, which is very much the core of a watch of this type with such a high water resistance. Now, looking at the watch from this angle, you see the fact it has 22mm lugs that give space for the vast majority of straps, and the watch comes on this very thick shark mesh style bracelet, which is very well executed in terms of the quality of the links, and doesn't give any sort of signs of weakness at all. It is a very well built bracelet. Now, putting the watch down, one should also note that it is also supplied with a leather strap. Now, the leather strap comes in the form of this black strap with these coated sides and this fairly simple buckle. Now, I must admit this is an area where I'm a tad sceptical about the need for this strap, because I think on the bracelet it's already a very impressive package, and it doesn't require this additional sort of endorsement for purchase. Though I do appreciate the fact they include a strap of this sort, I don't feel it's up to the very high standards that the bracelet is, because whilst it's an appealing strap, it doesn't really do very much for the design, which I think is better complemented by something like an isofrane rubber strap, or indeed that mesh bracelet. But the bracelet is also very well finished when one comes to the clasp, because the clasp is a butterfly style which has perlage on the inside, which just gives you a little hint of quality when you're opening it, and is of course a double locking form in this butterfly shape. And it does also have these links, which, as you can see, have these T-shaped bars which can be put in. Now, it comes with a great deal more than this, and really, in my estimation, would fit well over an 8-inch wrist, making this watch very much built for those larger wristed gentlemen. Aside from that very thick anti-reflective sapphire crystal on the front, one can notice the fact the bezel also has a sapphire insert, and this is instead of the conventional sort of ceramic insert which would give high scratch resistance like this sapphire. And the sapphire is in some ways a more old school solution, but in my eyes can be, especially for a watch that's inspired by this sort of 70s retro design, much more appealing. And the reason for this is that you retain that very high scratch resistance, but you get this translucent look, so you're looking through that bezel onto its backing, which has a fully loomed bottom as well as luminous markings on the top, giving you a very, very strong loom at night. Now, I'll show you that in the loom shot, which is one of the real advantages of this watch. And the bezel, in terms of action, rotates with 120 clicks, very, very smoothly, and the grip is surprisingly good, given the fact that scalloped bezels don't tend to give quite the grip of knurled ones. I must say I've noticed no difference whatsoever, and it works just as well in water as it does in air, which is something which does occasionally change the way a bezel functions. Looking through to the dial, this particular piece has a very, very subtle sunburst effect, and it really is very subtle effect to the centre of the dial, whilst one has this silvered section for this sort of chapter ring running around the edge for the graduations and markings, and then applied metal markers for each of the hours or 5-minute marks around the dial. These are of course luminous, and you'll see that later in the video, and the date is placed at 6 o'clock, giving this watch good balance, which I think otherwise would perhaps have been a problem, given the fact that the movement inside this watch is a fair bit smaller than the case, as a result of the size of the case, meaning that you would have ended up with a date at a particularly peculiar position if it had been placed at the 3 o'clock position. Now, the hands are attractively done, I must say are very well made, and give a very strong loom to this watch. And that was one of my complaints with previous ocean crawler models, was that their hands didn't have quite the amount of loom I would expect because of their shape, whereas here with this plongeur style hand, pioneered very much by Omega in the early 70s with their Ploprof models, gives a very good view of the time whilst using this watch on land, or if someone wants to use it for diving. Now, on the dial there are a few elements which I would say are slight complaints, and they're mostly to do with alignment. And this is seen in the fact that, for example, the date isn't directly aligned with the window, whilst also that chapter ring is slightly off-centre if you look at its distance between the markings as well as those larger applied indices. And that is a complaint which I think I would expect not to have on a watch of this price. So that is one thing which I will point out as a slight downside, which I find surprising given the quality of the case, which really is superb. However, I have no reason to believe this is anything other than this particular example. There is also a misalignment element on the bezel too, because you'll be able to note that these strakes don't line up with the individual markers, which again is something which I would appreciate resolved with these watches, because it's an aspect which I don't feel befits the price of the watch. However, in terms of its functionality, the movement inside this watch has been very well chosen, because they've used the Sellita SW200, which gives you this 4 hertz beat rate, so you get this very smooth tick to the second hand with 8 ticks per second. Of course, also has hacking and hand winding, which can be accessed via the crown after it's been unscrewed, allowing the seconds to be stopped, as well as the watch to be manually wound if it's run out of juice, so to speak. And so it is automatically wound as well with that 40-hour power reserve, and so is very much an industry standard movement, but gives you a very good quality Swiss movement for this watch, with 26 joules and a very, very well designed movement in terms of being very reliable, and also very easily and affordably serviced, which I think is a crucial aspect to these watches. Now, in terms of accuracy, and in terms of the example which I have here for review, this watch has been running at a steady plus 4 seconds a day, which I think is a very reasonable setup for a watch of this sort, especially since the watch hasn't been chronometer certified, and as a result hasn't gone through the normal test you would expect for a watch which was performing this well. So I must say this speaks volumes about the care taken producing the watch, that it's able to keep this sort of accuracy at a reliable and constant rate. So I must say that has impressed me in terms of the care taken. Now I should now show the watch on the wrist, and my wrist is just under 7 inches in circumference, so roughly the average size for a man's wrist, and so I think this gives a decent understanding of how the watch wears. Now on the wrist you'll notice the 50mm lug length isn't really a problem, because the cushion-shaped case does bring them in quite significantly by comparison to the 44mm size. Now I will point out to those who own something like a Seiko Marine Master, say the 300, this watch does wear much larger than that. And with its 15.6mm height, and the fact the case back is relatively flat, means that it doesn't sink into the wrist so much as sits on the top, so you really should be expecting a large watch with this piece. However, I haven't found the crown to interfere with the wrist, particularly in terms of digging into the hand, although of course if you do have a much smaller wrist this watch may be uncomfortable. However, the one complaint I do have is with the bracelet in terms of its clasp, and this was something which I noticed wearing the watch early on, was that I was finding it somewhat difficult to get the size right. And this is because to be able to change the length of this bracelet, you have to remove these T-shaped links. However, it's not as simple as simply removing the T, because you actually have to remove the next 2 links of mesh in order to be able to allow it to slot into the next area of the bracelet. So you're losing a good 1.5 or 2 centimetres from the bracelet with each movement, which is a very significant change in terms of what you're able to do without that micro adjustment you would have on a normal dive-style clasp. And so it means it's very difficult to get a fit which actually works for you. Because on my wrist you'll notice this watch is loose, because I've been unable to get the fit which I would have wanted, whereas on a wrist which is the correct size for this bracelet, it's very comfortable. So I think this is something which will depend upon the wrist, but I must say it would have been nice to see a slightly more refined type of design for the clasp to avoid this sort of difficulty. Of course, considering the legibility of this watch and the fact that it has these immense hands with a large amount of lume on them, in addition to, of course, having a very heavily lumed dial as well as bezel, I think it's only fair to show this watch in the dark to be able to demonstrate just the power of the lume, which is a really powerful side to this watch as far as making it a tool for diving. And in terms of choosing this watch over other options, I think it is something which will be a major contributing factor. Now, the lume on this watch is really phenomenal. As you can see, this is the watch in the dark, and it has this blue BGW9 coloured lume, which gives you this fantastic ice colour to the lume, and which means that you really can tell the time extremely quickly and very, very easily. Now, of course, this watch is a dive watch, and so you would expect powerful lume, but this really does go beyond the levels which you would expect or really request, because it really does demonstrate a great deal of care taken by the brand to produce something extremely legible. Now, I do like the fact that the bezel is split in half to give this sort of coloration difference, which does mean that you can tell the time and also tell where the bezel is, even when it's faded after multiple hours of use in the dark, because you can still tell which half is each half of the bezel, so you can tell really where the timing stands. And of course, there's more lume on the hands than anywhere else, but really I think this is a very, very impressive level of lume, especially for this sort of price. Now, I really feel I should offer a concluding verdict on this watch, because I've said various different comments and a variety of different views on this watch, which I think do vary. Because certainly I think that if you're looking for a sub-1,000-pound dive watch with a very high water resistance, an accurate and well-designed and well-made movement, and also a general build which is slightly retro, but also very much a modern statement as well with its size and also this particular bezel grip, I think it's a very attractive piece. The quality in terms of the operation of every feature of this watch is very good, with the crown operating very well, and you can often tell the quality of the threading by the way the crown operates, and this feels extremely sturdy and very well made. The bezel operates very smoothly, and this helium escape valve is a nice touch if you want to use this watch for more extreme saturation diving. Also, the quality of the loom is excellent for the price, and the general design is distinctive enough to stand out, but nothing too outrageous. And so really my only gripes with this watch are the alignment issues with the bezel, for example, and also the fact the bracelet isn't really designed for a wrist the size of mine, but will fit larger wrists much better. And so, as a result, I think that if you have a smaller wrist, this might not be the watch for you, but with a larger wrist, if you are looking for a product of this sort, it's an excellent piece in terms of the quality of the build, and in terms of the accuracy, where the reliability comes. And so if you enjoyed this video, then do please like, share and subscribe to help the channel, and also to be able to see more videos and content here in future. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, out.